Hello again, everybody. It's Neil Gavin here, independent learning and development, social media, learning technologies consultant, and looking forward to sharing our discussions around our updated VR in learning research. I'm joined today here by
Rachel Burnham at Burnham L&D. So I'm a learning and development consultant based in Manchester. And we have with us today
Marco Faccini. I wear many hats as like Neil. So one of them relevant today is that I'm a strategic advisor to Immerse, but also a consultant in the VR AR industry.
Thanks, Marco. Right, Rachel, would you like to walk us through what we're going to do today?
So this picture shows Neil and myself on our VR Odyssey, and today in this half an hour broadcast we're going to be doing a bit of a brief recap of what we looked at back in the spring, and then we're going to bring that up to date in the refresh section. Marco's going to report from a conference that he attended earlier in the summer, and then together the three of us are going to reflect on some key takeaways from our experiences.
Brilliant, thank you. Let's try and go to the right slide. So in that research that we did between sort of January and March at the start of the year, Rachel, we went on quite a journey, as you say, quite an odyssey. We wrote several blogs. We did a couple of these video chats and conversations, and we produced some resources and some outputs that we shared with people at the time. Where do you think we kind of got to at that point in the research?
I think at that stage what we'd got was a bit of a feel for what was happening in VR in relation to learning. So we'd started to explore a little bit about what some of the options were, some of the different levels of immersion that you can get within VR. And we were starting to explore some of the ways that it can be used, but also perhaps where it's best not to be used, when there are other more appropriate tools that could be used. And so we were starting to really work out that it's not a silver bullet, it's not the answer to everything in learning and development, but it's a new, fabulous tool in the right place.
The right tool in the right place at the right time for the right job.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And I think we enjoyed that initial exploration, didn't we? But I think we recognize that things have moved on. Even it's such a pacey business that the tools are increasing, the consumer awareness is increasing, and I think particularly for L&D, there's even more of a requirement to have an awareness, but not necessarily to dive in at the deep end.
I think it is about being alert to what's out there, thinking about whether it's relevant to your own organisation, the particular needs that there are, and then experimenting, trying things out. So it's about having that awareness.
Yeah. One of the things that you experienced when we were in that tryout phase, and it highlights an issue that I think is quite important, was an element of discomfort with one of the VR experiences that you had.
Yes, in the course of the research, we tried out lots of different VR packages, and with the vast majority, it was a great experience, but I had one really bad experience. So I was trying this package out, which was about driving a forklift truck, and I was only 1 minute, I think it's 1 minute 18 seconds in, and already I was starting to feel really sick. I suffer from migraines, and I was getting a real visual disturbance from it, so I immediately stopped. But I was then ill with a migraine for 6 hours. And I know, Marco, we were talking about this, and you were able to explain for me why that occurred. What was the problem there?
Yeah, so there's two things fundamentally in and around nausea. Now, if I remember my stats correctly, if you take the world's population, it's only something like 0.1%, or it might be 1% of people in the world suffer with nausea. So, but what's interesting, of course, it's one of those typical things, oh, it's a new technology and it's going to make you sick because, it's prevalent to making you sick because I suffer from it. But actually, there's a very small minority of people. The two main reasons why it happens is, one is what we term as bad coding. And it's funny, if we liken it to e-learning, you have a bad e-learning experience. Yes, it doesn't make you sick, but it's bad, and you don't engage and you don't learn anything. In VR, it can obviously make you ill. And when we say bad coding, that's about the things there. One is that the graphics are blocky, or the resolution is not very good. That's one. The second one, and not to get too technical, is what we call polygons, meshing. So for very good content creation in VR, we need to be getting to something like 30 million polygons. And that's sort of, if you liken it to like the TV, the frame rates, so it's like frame rates and pixelization, it's the same sort of scenario. So bad content creation is one. The second one, and it could have been the reason why you suffered in that particular instance, and I liken this to a train. So you guys have probably been on a train, or do you remember being on a train and you're looking outside the window, and then as you're looking outside the window, coming past you on the track is another train, and you watch it, and then all of a sudden that train starts to go backwards. Even though it's going past you, it's going backwards. And of course, if you think about it, if you reflect back on when that happened to you, you probably felt a little bit sick in your stomach, because what it's doing is that tracking with your eyes. And this is the same in VR. We have to be very conscious of when we're creating and there's moving objects around us, we've got to make sure it's in tune with our brain fundamentally. Because if it's not in tune with our brain, and I think this is what's probably happened with you because you're on a forklift truck, there might have been things moving around you. If they're not in tune at the pace they would be normally in life, or the way that you can accept it in the real world, then it's going to give you headaches, or it's going to make you sick. No different than being on a roller coaster. So they're the two main reasons. And what I like about that second one is about that motion element, that design phase, if you like, is, the world says the instructional designer is dead. Well, I was on that bandwagon for a while, but I've come to a place now where instructional designer is not dead. It might not be that name correctly. It could be an experienced designer, but certainly we need people who are designing in mind of what it would be like if we were doing this in the real world.
And I think for me, what this really brings out, because I've had just one bad experience, and then since then I've used lots of other VR packages, and they've all been really positive experiences. I've not had the slightest bit of nausea, no headache, no problem. And so what it really brings home to me is, don't be put off if you have a bad experience. Step away from that and try something else, because it's probably an indication that there's some problem with the design of that particular package. And I mean, since then I've actually been climbing up a pole, and I actually fell off the pole in VR, and even though I have vertigo, I didn't have any ill effects from that. So, and then I've been on a plane, and I've been on the wings looking at air patterns, and again, no problem whatsoever with that. So obviously it's to do with the design of the package.
Yeah, and to that point, it's great that you mentioned the plane one and yourself with vertigo. I have a use case where I had a person who has never been on a plane because they suffer profoundly from vertigo. And I put them into VR and I put them on a plane. And 3 months later, he sent me a message saying, I'm not cured, but I got on a plane. And I truly believe it was because I was able to experience it in VR first, which fundamentally what it did, and this for me is, typical human trait. We are ones that fall into habits, and we also have the fear of the unknown. What he was basically saying is, because he was able to confront his fear of the unknown in a safe place, it then gave him the confidence to actually go on a real plane.
Yes. Yes, it's a great example that of, you know, using VR to go somewhere that you wouldn't, you know, there would be a risk element, a personal risk element in that sense. It could be a physical risk element, and that actually allows you to practice and experience that, but in a safe way. And I think that's one of the great uses of VR.
Yes.
It goes directly to the thing we said before, does it not? About it, you are able to walk in somebody else's shoes, and in that non-risk environment, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think for me the key point is, you know, whatever your belief is in around learning theories and learning models, and whether they are relevant in today's world or not. For me, the one thing that hasn't changed since the dinosaurs is that practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And VR gives you the ability to practice.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Let's move on. So where are we now then? Rachel, you've got some really good examples of some applications that we've come across in the last few months.
Yes, and actually the first one picks up on that point about opportunities to practice and develop skills and practice until you get it perfect. So the National College for High Speed Rail, they've invested in a VR train experience so that driving instruction can take place, at least in part, in a VR simulation. So I think that's a really good example. And then a lovely example just from this morning, a program that BBC Three has put together, and it's about using VR to enable people who have some different mental health conditions to describe and share with other people something of that experience. And what they were doing was they were using Tilt Brush, which is a VR package which allows you to create in 3D and draw and use colour and use imagination. And I've had a go actually with that package. It's great fun to use. I would love to do 3D sketch notes with that. But what they're doing on this in this program is people with different conditions. So somebody with anorexia, people with different conditions have filmed using this, and they're talking about their condition and using the imagery that they create using Tilt Brush to give other people some sense of that. So it's a real example of that, using VR to enable you to walk in other people's shoes. And the lovely thing about this, of course, is it's going to be available that we can all see it on the BBC iPlayer. The actual program is called Step Inside My Head, and that's available at the moment.
And we'll put the link to that up into the sources and resources sheet that we'll put out to accompany this video when we publish it. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things in relation to that and Marco, we've touched briefly on this before. A while back, I had an inquiry from somebody on Twitter where in reference to the work that Rachel and I did previously, with regards to whether or not you could get physical feedback. And the specific question was in relation to feeling weight in a 3D environment that was simulating I think it was a warehouse or something like that. And without a great deal of knowledge, but having picked up on it on the research, I was aware of haptics as a means of or a definition, a description of being able to experience some kind of physicality. I know when we were playing with your pill machine simulation, and we had the handsets, that we were opening the doors and all that sort of thing, we were able to experience that, but not, there wasn't a physical resistance type sensation in that. But I believe that this haptics type approach is bringing that more into the virtual 3D experience. So where are we with that?
Yeah, and I actually think there's two things there. So I think there's an easy answer. Obviously, it has its limitations, and then there's the haptics answer, if you like, which is happening, but will take a little bit longer. So I'm going to cover both, if I may. So the one that we can do today. So for example, this cup. So just picture the scene. I'm in a virtual environment, and maybe I'm in a coffee shop, and I want to bring this physical cup into the virtual world. Well, I can do that right now. So if you take HTC Vive, for example, in about March, April of this year, they released their tracker, which we affectionately call in the industry a puck, because it's like the size and shape of a ice hockey puck. Now, this puck has some Velcro on it, and you can strap it to a physical object. By strapping it to that physical object, you can then bring it into the virtual world. So I have done that with a baseball bat, for example. So I have a pitcher. So I'm in the stadium, in the Red Sox in Boston, and the virtual pitcher is pitching the balls at me, and I have the tracker on my baseball bat. So the baseball bat is now in my virtual world, and I'm hitting the virtual ball with a real baseball bat. So I've got that weight, I've got that feel. Something that we've done, we did it for EY, professional services company, for their British Lions tour, in that they wanted a kicking game, and they wanted to put it in the hospitality suites in Down Under. And it was very simply, in the stadium, you had the goalposts up, the rugby players in front of you, you took the virtual rugby ball out of the air, you put it on the tee, and we strapped the tracker to your foot. So you kicked the virtual rugby ball with your real foot. Clever. People have used it for guns. So you can bring real world guns rather than a virtual gun into an environment. So you can got some scenarios there, something I'm doing with the police, for example. So I think, so the easy answer is we can do that right now. It has some limitations, of course, but we can do it right now. Now, if you're looking at the haptic side, so you're wanting then tension, if you like, and wanting to feel weight. Where we are with haptics is there are haptic gloves right now, and there is a haptic full body suit, for example. So you can put your whole body into the virtual world. So that's quite cool. Now, it's got some limitations. So you can bring, you've got the sensory elements into it, but and the physical element into it. But we're not quite there yet with tension and weight, so to speak. That weight we can bring in, obviously, but tension, we're not quite there yet. The haptics aren't quite there, but we're not far away. And as you alluded to earlier on, Neil, this what's so exciting about this space, it is moving at a pace. And I have stopped saying to people when they ask me questions about when is this next part of the technology coming, I've stopped saying, it'll be 6 months or 9 months, because I am just way off the mark. It's like 2 months, 3 months. I'm seeing tech almost weekly, and some of it I get to play with, which is great, which is the next stage on. So, we liken it to AR. It's a story, if I may. Last week, I was, not last week, the week before, I was at Learning Live. I was talking to a guy there from SAP, and he was very interested in augmented reality. And he said to me, what I really want is like that hologram in Star Wars on my desk. That would be brilliant. But I'm not reading anything about it. And I said to him, do you know what? That's a long way away yet. Although I did have in the back of my mind something which I couldn't share. But that night, there was a venture capital call that I was on. And the news was announced by Leap Motion that they think next year they will be shipping that technology. So early, middle of next year, we'll be able to get augmented reality hologram type scenarios on our desks.
Wow.
Yeah. So think of what was the little droid on Star Wars? Was it C-3PO? So when his little light came up and then you have Princess Leia there in the hologram, think that's coming.
Yes. Yes.
Love it.
And there's so much happening with AR at the moment. Lots of news about developments, and I think that is an area where things are moving on very rapidly and have moved on since the spring. So I mean, we've just had the announcement of the new iPhone 10, and that's going to have a facility within it for AR, and developers have already been putting out some tools and playing with some of the tools that could be used for. So I've seen examples of it being used for fun games, chasing pigeons around a room, which seems bizarre, but anyway, there we go. And more usefully, from a learning point of view, using AR to provide instructions about how to create an espresso coffee. So that's, you know, you can just see all sorts of uses for that. And when we thought that Google Glass was kind of all said and done, in fact, they've been working away and refining and redeveloping Google Glass and looking at it particularly in the context of the workplace and using it to support learning and performance support. So lots of engineering, medical applications of that. So lots happening there. And then also we've got this, Pokemon Go seems to have kind of gone out of fashion. We've suddenly got Snapchat getting in on the act with the introduction of an augmented reality element to that popular social media function. So you could already create a Bitmoji. This is like a little cartoon characterization of yourself, but now that Bitmoji can be got to react and move around in the real world. Now, at the moment, that's just a fun, amusing little application. It kind of reminds me some of the old films of seeing Gene Kelly dancing with Tom and Jerry, that sort of thing. But that's bringing it into people's everyday experience. And I think that will get people more used to AR in all sorts of applications.
Yeah, and with the new iPhone 10 or iPhone X, whichever you choose to call it, obviously you have that facility built in as well with the emojis, in that because it's got that facial recognition software, it changes your emoji as to your expression. So if you're going to go like that, it's replicated in your emoji. So very, very clever. So lower end they are, but clever. But to your point, and I think it's a great point, it's like all the technologies, you know, how do we get mass adoption? And mass adoption is the commercialization or the consumer utilizing those technologies and seeing practical uses for them.
Yes.
Yeah, and they bring that expectation into the workplace. And the business will be found wanting if in fact they're not able to meet their colleagues' expectations, at least part way, around being able to use those tools. Guys, I have to be really careful with time here because I'm on the free account, so we're going to run out of time. So what I'd like to do, if I may, very quickly, we've got about 5 minutes. Marco, if you can just very quickly give us your 3 key takeaways from the Realities 360 conference that you attended in the States. And then we'll just very quickly do a summary, but we're going to have to be very tight on timing. So 3 key takeaways from Realities 360, please.
Yeah, 3 key takeaways are corporate companies are now looking at VR in particular. So they understand the technology, or starting to understand it, and they're starting to see real applications in their business where they can use it. And whilst it was always thought of technical type training, they're now seeing soft skills type use cases. because of the emotive element and because of the sensorial element that you can have in VR. So that would be one. The second one, related to AR again, is that has a huge buzz and a bigger buzz. But whilst everyone is looking to see how to utilize it, the technology is not there yet. It's just not there yet. So my point to them was, you can do VR right now, but AR, not so much so, because I don't see the application of where you're holding a device in your hand to do your job. Why would you want to do that? That doesn't seem to make sense. And fundamentally, it's still just a data overlay. And then the third one would be the fact that there's a community being built in learning and development. So unlike e-learning, where it tends to be vendor driven, and it's one of the reasons I got into VR, because it's not vendor driven, it's community driven. I see a groundswell of learning and development professionals building a community, willing to share, willing to learn, willing to fail out loud. They're my three key takeaways.
Brilliant. Thank you, Marco. I'd like to think that we're part of that community, and just by having this conversation in itself.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you. Very quickly then, just an opportunity for some quick reflection. Rachel, anything to add?
I think the thing for me is just about keeping your eye open, being alert to what is happening around VR and AR, and actually being willing to experiment, perhaps with some of these smaller uses, these popular uses of it, just to get a feel of it. But also, I don't think we should start to feel in L&D that we have to be using it unless we've got a way that's going to work for our organisation.
Brilliant, thank you. In the 2 minutes left to us, I'm just going to very quickly sum up, if you like. Marco, it's been fantastic having you on board and bringing those insights into our research. What Rachel and I'll do is we'll take this away, we'll collate some resources and sources and resources that will support around the conversation that we've had. We'll publish that. I'm not entirely sure how we're going to do that yet. Probably another Google Doc that we can share around the piece. We might even get a joint blog out of this or something like that. So it's an ongoing journey, and as you say, it's moving so rapidly, we can't predict exactly where it's going to go or how quickly it's going to go, but we see some real exciting potential futures for VR and AR in learning, which is what this research was all about. So Marco, thanks very much. Rachel,
Thank you.
Good to talk to you again, and we'll close this off, and I'll say thank you very much to everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.